Welcome, everybody, to the Cone of Shame Veterinary Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Andy Roark. I am here with my friend, Dr. Natalie Marks, and we are talking about fear of change. And specifically, we're talking about how people struggle to change careers or change jobs in veterinary medicine. If you are someone who has ever thought, I don't know if I want to keep doing this job forever, but also I'm not really sure what else I would do, this episode is probably for you guys. I love this conversation. I always like to think about what it means to close a chapter in our lives and move on to the next chapter. And that's what we get into talking with Dr. Mark. So anyway, guys, I hope you'll enjoy this episode. Natalie is amazing. She's super fun to talk to. There's a lot of really good stuff in here. Let's get into it.
This is your show. We're glad you're here. We want to help you in your veterinary career. Welcome to the Cone of Shame with Dr. Andy Roark.
Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Natalie Marks. How are you, my friend?
I am great, Andy. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. I am so thrilled to have you on the podcast. I always enjoy talking with you. You and I met, I think it was only about 2 years ago. And since then, I've just seen you doing so many things. You're doing a lot of speaking and presenting. We've done webinars together, and just you wear a lot of hats, and you juggle a lot, and you always have your stuff. I'm sure there's a front stage, backstage thing. You always seem to have your stuff together. And like, if I know I'm working with you, I'm like, oh boy, I better get organized because Natalie's going to know what she's doing.
Gotta up your game.
I do. I absolutely do. For those who do not know you, you are a veterinarian by training. You have been a practice owner for how long did you own your practice?
12 years. So a long time in Chicago. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so it was a big practice too, like 11 vets.
11 doctors, yeah.
Aha. Mm-hmm. I remember that. I remember stuff sometimes. Great. You are an educational and marketing consultant. You are the CEO of VANE, which is the Veterinary Angel Network for Entrepreneurs, which is... Actually, just tell me real quick about VANE, because it's such a cool idea, and I don't think people know that anything like this exists.
Yeah, well, we're pretty new. We're babies. So this is just had our 4th birthday. But essentially what we are is a group of 73% of us are veterinarians. The rest are veterinary professionals from the industry. So previous pharma executives or diagnostics or finance, real estate, but anybody that's connected to the veterinary industry. And we are angel investors. So we are beyond friends and family. We are the first investors that come into businesses, and we take where there's been a very large gap in the animal health industry. We help companies get off the ground in a very critical phase. So we have our thesis is that we're based in science. No brainer there. We're all scientists at heart. Sure. And we provide direction, connection, and funding to those that are helping advance the animal health space. So things in therapeutics like monoclonals or new biotech or new AI, new things that help create better operational efficiencies for hospitals. We have 31 portfolio companies that we've invested in thus far, and we've had over 400 companies come through our funnel. So we're making an impact, but lots more to come. And it's really exciting and very apropos to what we're going to be talking about today, because never did I ever think that I was going to be running an angel investment group when I was clinically practicing. So it's very cool.
It is really cool. And it's very apropos. So the reason I invited you on, I saw an article that you had recently in today's Veterinary Business magazine, and it's called The Fear of the Unknown. And you talk about feeling sort of anxious, especially around contemplating career change. And these are often those articles that I kind of skim over. You know what I mean? And they're kind of paint by numbers or things. But I think I really like what you wrote. And it's sort of a thoughtful piece. And there's a number of things I looked at, and it just really resonated with me. So honestly, I wanted to bring you on, and it's sort of this is a neat setup. But you start the article and you start talking with one of your friends who's a veterinarian, and she sort of lowers her voice and says, I don't think I want to keep doing this. And you were kind of like, well, why don't you quit? And she was like, being a veterinarian is all I know.
Yes.
And so I saw that and I thought, boy, I've had a lot of those conversations. And so yeah, I mean, how often do you think how often do you talk to vets that want to do something different, but you feel like they're too afraid to do it? Is that a common conversation?
It is. A lot of people reach out to me because I think there are, well, one, I make myself visible and approachable to people who want to maybe do something different. But I think, too, there aren't a lot of people out there that truly have, you and I were talking about, sort of reinvented ourselves, right? So, and I'm not sure it's necessarily that they're afraid as much as they don't know the first step. Like they don't even know where to begin. And some of that could be fear. Certainly, I think for some people, it's overwhelming fear. They almost get sort of that paralysis by analysis, right? They're thinking all these things and they just kind of get frozen in one spot. But I think that the resonating kind of phrase that I hear from people is, talked about this, right? When you get introduced, people to completely identify almost overwhelmingly as a veterinarian. And if they weren't clinically practicing, who would they be?
Yeah.
And I was there. I was definitely one of those people. And I found myself thinking to myself, one, who would I be if I didn't practice every day, working 90-hour weeks as a practice owner? But two, what are other people going to think about me if I'm not the classic small animal hospital practicing veterinarian?
Yeah.
Like, am I worth much? And that's something people say.
I think you're totally right. There was a question that I heard recently. So there's this guy, his name is David Brooks, and he wrote a book called How to Know a Person. And his whole sort of hypothesis is we should all be working harder to really deeply know each other. And so one of his favorite questions is, what would you do if you weren't afraid? And he'll ask people that question. And I've always thought it was a fascinating question. And I don't think I've ever had the guts to actually ask someone, what would you do if you weren't afraid? He sort of says, the things that people tell you give you great insight to sort of who they are and what they think. I do think that, before I tell you what I think, let me ask what you think. True or false, veterinarians specifically have a very hard time of seeing themselves as something other than a practicing doctor. I don't know if, air conditioner repair guys are like, look, this is who I am. I don't imagine that they do. Do you agree with that?
True. I mean, as high as I could possibly give a percentage. Yeah. If we look at our profession, and I wrote a piece on this too, which I got a lot of feedback on positively, because I think for the first time, introverts felt seen.
Yeah.
Most veterinarians by personality types are introverted perfectionists. Yeah. So if you think about that, right, you've got a person who recharges from being by themselves. So they're put in an industry where they have constant feedback and are expected to act extroverted most of the day, right? So that's a draining day. And then they're perfectionists, which by default is they're terrified of failure, right? Because that's true failure to a perfectionist. So yes. You've got two things that are stacking up against you already as a personality type in a profession that demands, if you think about it, as close to perfection as possible on these cases, right? Every day. Yeah. And clients expect miracles a lot. And we're dealing with very emotional concepts and very emotional humans, both internal to our hospital and external. And then we carry all of that, because we're empaths, we carry all of that home with us. It doesn't leave a lot of time to get to know who you are outside of what you chose to be. And I think this is a little cliche, but I think there's a lot of truth to it. It is a calling, right? For most veterinarians, like we are driven to do this work. And I think when that is part of your personality, it's hard to separate yourself out from the work that you do, right? But then when you're faced with a decision, like when I sold my practice and I'm faced with a decision, what do I do now? That is scary, right? Because now I'm saying, well, I don't think I'm going to practice. So what can I do as a veterinarian? And then thinking about, which I think I wrote about too, that spotlight effect is so much worse than the reality, right?
Yeah, I want to come back to the spotlight effect, because that was actually the part that spoke to me. But I want to dig in here a little bit more. There's a lot of people who come to me and they're like, yeah, I think I might like to do something different. And I kind of look at them, and everybody's job, can be hard, and we all get tired, sometimes, and things like that. And I often internally sort of question, is she serious, or is he serious about this? And I think a lot of times we go, I don't want to do this anymore. And it's like, if you've been a parent with young kids that were running around tearing your house up, you had the thought like, I don't want to do this anymore. But that's not really how you felt. But it was how you felt in that moment. And so I do kind of wonder that about sort of, making a career change and stuff like that. And then you said, when I sold the practice, I suddenly felt like, well, who am I? And so let me ask you sort of this question. Thinking back, when you decided to sell your practice, What was it that sort of put you in that position? Were you selling your practice because you wanted to make a change? Or did you want to sell your practice and then you felt like you were in a position where you sort of needed to change? And so that's kind of where I always play with this idea of, do people make changes because they want something new, or do they make changes because they're done with what they have? And I think that those are distinctly different things. And in your case, which of those was more true, Natalie?
I think it was a bit of a hybrid for me. I did not immediately wake up one morning and say, I'm ready to sell my practice. In fact, my business partner at the time sort of spurned on the conversation. And once that got wind out in the world, we had a lot of interested parties, and it sort of took on a life of its own. You know, change is hard. And I think a lot of people wait too late to change when they are forced to change.
Yeah.
And that's never the change you want, because it's never with the energy that you want to have. It's usually not the situation that you necessarily desired or dreamed of, because you're forced into that quickly. It's often not with the people that you want to be changing with. I would say in the moment we decided to sell, I was bittersweet. I said, I was not ready to end practice ownership. But I also said to myself, you know what? If I'm not going to own this, what am I going to do? And I had some time through that process. I didn't wait till I signed the documents and gave over the keys. I had a year where I said to myself, what do I like to do?
Yeah.
And I think that's some of what we'll talk about later about the reset is, where do you even begin to say, I'm going to do proactive change. I don't want to feel like I have to change in a week. I don't want to have to move in 2 days. I don't want to have to find a job overnight. None of that stuff feels good. But if you decide you're going to change, what are the steps to make it the change that you want on your timeline? So that's change that feels good to you, you know?
I really like that. Like, just being proactive. You dictate the terms of what this change looks like, as opposed to, I guess I've been forced out, or I stuck around until everyone else left, or whatever the whole thing is. And now you don't have the ability to sort of pursue what you want. I had this idea, and for a long time, I went through the same sort of path I think a lot of people go through, where in my 20s, I always kind of figuring things out and having fun, and and life was pretty good. I was going to vet school. I was working hard, but I kind of had a plan. It was mostly about growth and getting to the place that I wanted to be, like getting to the career. And then in my 30s, I became a vet. I had young children. I had a fairly new marriage in my early 30s, and I kind of threw myself into, I'm going to be in the clinic. I am going to work. I'm going to support the family. I am a veterinarian. This is the life that I'm going to make. And it wasn't until sort of the pandemic came, but I was, in my 40s, that I sort of got rattled, and I kind of thought, is this hammer down, like hard driving in my career? And at that point I was traveling a lot. I was speaking like all over the world, and just really, I still travel, but not anything like I used to. And it's funny, I kind of came to that realization of like, I don't know that this is how I want to be defined, or at least how I want to sort of see myself. And part of me for a while felt guilty. I was like, I wish I could tell younger Andy, that the way we define ourselves is important, and you don't have to define yourself as a veterinarian, and there's other things in life. But Natalie, I don't know that you really can. And so this idea is, I wonder if there's natural phases in our lives where we're growing, where we're sort of trying to establish ourselves. And honestly, early in your career, maybe you should identify as a veterinarian. Maybe you really should lean into that and make that your identity, because you need those skills. But then I don't know that that's sustainable for a whole career. And so I wonder if we all naturally go through a leaning back process at some point in our career. Does that make any sense when I say it out loud?
Yeah, it does. And I think the place where people go wrong, or at least maybe struggle, is they don't lean back, right? They don't look at it and they don't say, wow, maybe this was my chapter. I like to think of my life in chapters, because I feel like some chapters finish and you don't want to go back and reread them, but you had to read it to see what was coming next, right? Or seasons. And I think that's really important. One of the best things my life coach ever taught me was that for you to fill yourself with the stuff that you really want, you got to let go and make space for it. And I think a lot of us don't do that well. Like, I'm still really working on that, of letting go the things that don't serve me, letting go of, maybe friendships that aren't that were seasonal, right? Seasonal in your life, maybe in your early 20s, but they're not necessarily serving the person you become in your 40s. The same thing professionally, though. If you're doing things that don't drive and fill your core values of who you are, and you're just doing them to do them, are those really helping you become place in the person that you want to be?
Yeah.
And I agree with you. I think there's definitely places and seasons of your life where if you didn't lean in, like if I didn't lean in early in my career and have great mentorship, maybe you wouldn't have had the opportunity to have practice ownership. And if I hadn't had my practice ownership, I wouldn't be in a place to be consulting like I am now. And I wouldn't have met some of my colleagues that I'm now investing with. And I think it all builds. I think it's a question, though, if you don't at periods of your life, if you don't relook at it, right? And figure out like, what did I like? And I want to pull through, and what was not serving me at that time. And maybe I thank that part of my life and let it go and make room for the stuff I want at this phase. So, the good news about humans, right, is that we're fluid. We don't have to be stuck in one place, and that's the rest of our lives. And that's, I think, the big thing with a lot of people that come to me and say, all I've known is being a practicing veterinarian. That's all. I hear that all the time. All I know. And that's not true. That's all you've experienced up to this point, but that's not all you know, right?
Yeah.
There's being a veterinarian, you have skills that you have that are untapped to you, that we've had to learn along the way. And some of them apply across all industries. Some of our problem solving and our deductive work and being able to rationally work through cases and being able to communicate to clients and understanding personalities, and so many of these life skills that we just brush off as part of our day, but are really, really helpful in other things that you want to do in life. So it's not all you know, it's just all you've let yourself be exposed to thus far.
I think you made this point really well in the article. To me, I think it really sort of comes down to two things. And so one is the genuine people who are like, this is all that I know how to do. I think that that's true. I think those people are probably far outnumbered by people who are affected by, when you talk about the spotlight effect. It's not, I'll say this is all I know, but the truth is I worry that everyone else is looking at me, and if I change, people are going to think, oh, he couldn't make it, or he couldn't hack it, or wonder what happened, and he must have gotten sued, and they like make up stories, whatever. Like, but you have this feeling that like the neighbors are all watching you, and like you're not going to be as valuable to them if they leave, and everyone's going to have these ideas. And so I'm going to get you to talk for a second more about the spotlight effect. But in your estimation, do you think that those things, if you had to sort of pick two sides of the scale of this is all I know versus this is what people think of me, and I'm afraid of what they'll think if I no longer do this. Do you have a sense of kind of how often people fall into category one of what I know and category two of what others are thinking?
Yeah, I think it's heavily more the spotlight, the latter. Yeah. There are some people that they are, their life is being, I'll just say, a traditional practicing veterinarian. And if you are joyful and balanced and feel fulfilled in life, amazing. Keep it up. Yeah. I don't find that as often as I find people who are truly struggling. And there could be a myriad of reasons why they're struggling, but a lot of it, and we know, I'm not going to belabor the social media aspect of this, of, everybody else's life is so wonderful. Look at mine. Oh, yeah. And there's this huge spotlight, right, sitting on me, and everyone's wondering, I went through it myself. Why are you not practicing anymore? Why are you not owning your hospital anymore? You're doing what? You're teaching? You're what are you doing? Veterinarians do that? If it makes you happy, in the immortal words of Mel Robbins, let them have their impressions and what they're going to think. Let you do what makes you happy, right? We only have one life. So I find that especially in my age group, so in the 40s, a lot of the moms, especially that I interact with, are really struggling. And I don't know if it's the stereotypical midlife crisis kind of filling in there a little bit or impacting it, but are really struggling with this identity of what are people going to think of me, right? What am I going to say in PTA meetings and at softball practices? And what are people going to think versus just living your life? It's very hard to do that now, right? With social media, where in an instant, everybody knows everything about you. Yeah. And everyone and their brother can comment, right? With no filters. And I feel like it's a really challenging way to live life.
And it's amazing how we are like emotional animals, right? So my daughter is filling out college applications right now, which is a whole other stages and,
Yes,
you
it
know, of
is.
life sort of thing. And my wife was helping her and sort of filling out some of the like the paperwork around whatever the early decision thing or whatever. And so my wife looks at me today and she says, I need some information on you for this paperwork for our daughter's application. And I said, sure. And she said, is this the best email address? And I was like, yeah. And this is your mobile's the phone number. Like, yeah, totally go with that. And she goes, great. It asks your occupation and they have veterinarian, but I put you small business owner. And I was like, what? And she was like, Andy, you're so much more a small business owner that like, you know, you practice 1 day a week. Like that's not your main job anymore. And she's right. But also my knee-jerk emotional reaction to that was that's the wrong box. But
Yeah.
it's not the wrong box. And why do the people looking at my daughter's application care? There's no reason. But I was struck by the fact that it felt discordant when I heard it. And it's so strange how we kind of get used to these things. And when you hear them told back to you, I don't know, it's hard to explain that feeling.
I think a lot of people feel that way. Or, you know, if I'm sitting on an airplane and someone says, you know, what do you do? And I say, I'm a veterinarian. And they start asking me about cat diarrhea. And I say, well, I don't do that anymore. And they go, what do you do? And then I explain it. And they're like, veterinarians do that? And it's to your point. I am definitely more of an entrepreneur, an investor, and educator now. But it's not the but. And I'm a veterinarian. I think that we as an industry have done a disservice though, because if you think about like career days, right? When we go into schools, nobody goes in there and says, and you could be a veterinary consultant or a veterinary educator, right?
I spend my day on Zoom calls.
Yeah, nobody goes in there. It's all the, you know, the fun puppy exams and, you know, doing surgery on a snake. But nobody talks about that. And when we talk about alternative career pathways in veterinary medicine, it's typically like one lecture a year at AVMA, right? Or a random article on JAVMA once in a while, or a feature of somebody that's in the Air Force, right? Like we give such little attention to the alternative career path that you're sort of like, well, I guess I fit in here now. And one of these weirdos that like gets 1 hour a year of attention. It's not helpful, right? And with today's amount of burnout, compassion fatigue, and people wanting alternative lifestyles and just reaching a point, like we talked about, a chapter or a season in your life where maybe this is not defining you anymore. We need to normalize that these are other awesome professional choices that you can make that can leave you fulfilled. And in the end of the day, who cares?
Yeah. I think that's the spotlight effect, right? The spotlight effect is this, you know, fake belief that we have that there's a spotlight on us and everyone's looking at us. And the truth is, people don't care that much about they just don't care that much. And it took me a long time to come to really believe that and go, oh, no one's really looking and they really don't care that. As long as you're happy, honestly, most people are totally fine, excited for you.
And they're worrying about their own life, right? Like, I think I talk about that too with my life coach about if you've done Enneagram testing, you know, it's different personality testing, very similar Myers-Briggs and things. But a lot of us are type 2, where we're very empathic and we're externally focused. We want to people please, right? And help people feel good. And we need this validation. But ultimately, at the end of the day, they're not really worrying about you, right? Like, why are you so powerful that people are thinking about what you're doing for dinner or what your meeting is at 9 a.m.? Nobody really cares. That seems a little lonely when you first think about it, but honestly, it's quite empowering because it gives you, just to your question, right? What would you do if you weren't afraid? If nobody really cared what you did, dream big, what would it be?
Yeah.
Right.
If you're like, I would not go to the vet clinic, I'm like, oh, that means something. Like that is an important self-discovery of if nobody cared, I would not go to the vet clinic. Oh, well, then we need to think about what you would do.
Yes.
And start to think about, you know, maybe we in our real life should do more of that.
Yes. It's kind of an enlightening exercise to do. Like when you have 10 minutes to yourself where it's quiet, no one can bother you, you turn technology off, and you literally just sit there and ask yourself that question. Sometimes what comes up is painful but needed. Like when I was selling my practice, I was saying to myself, oh, I can't leave my team. I don't want to do it. But then when I really asked myself, what's one good thing that's going to come out of this? And I was like, I'm going to actually be a mom again. I was never
Yeah.
around. I was constantly on the move, constantly had nannies, constantly had help. I was missing all kinds of events. And that's been one of the most beautiful things that's come out of this is just
Yeah.
tons of time with my kids. So I think to the point, fear of the unknown, we often don't think about like what one good thing could happen. We always go to the negative, right? With fears. So we always go like, if I do this, what horrible things could happen? But we don't ever really truthfully ask ourselves what one good thing could come out of this.
Yeah. I love that. I love the what's one good thing. I think the other thing that it took me a long time to learn is, people are more resilient than we give them credit for. And the reason that I say that is, I talk to so many vets and they're like, if I left, my clients would be devastated. They would be lost. And I don't mean to hurt people's feelings and I don't want to be rude. And I'm not talking to anyone specifically out there, but I'm going to tell you, your clients would be fine. Like they would be sad because you did a good work and they love you. They will find another vet. Like they will. Every pet owner out there will find another vet. And they may never like that vet quite as much as they like you, but they will go on and they will be fine. And it's the same thing you say, I love my team and your team loves you. Your team members will go on with their life, and they will like their new job. They'll probably like some things about it and other things not as much. And if they don't like it, then they'll probably go and find another job. And they will go on. And I don't mean that to be negative, but I'll tell you, Natalie, one of the things in my life that was really challenging from a change standpoint was feeling like people depended on me. That was a heavy burden that really made change feel impossible at different times in my life. Because I thought, I do not want to let these people down. I don't want to let my employees down. I don't want to let the pet owners down. I don't want to let my coworkers down. They need me. I'm supporting them. And that's just a level of self-focus that's not warranted. But I don't know. When I was sort of reading you writing about, sort of the spotlight and the weight that we put on ourselves and how you can find other things and what are you looking forward to, my own life was going back to all the veterinarians who said I would do something different, but my clients couldn't handle it if I left. And I thought people are more resilient than you think that they are. And so anyway, I found that very liberating. Natalie, thanks so much for being here. Thanks for talking through everything with me. I could keep talking to you forever, but where can people find you online? Where can they learn about what you're up to?
Yeah, so a couple different places. So Marks DVM Consulting is my website. So kind of see some of the work I'm doing and I have it set up like a portfolio. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking to yourself, gosh, I just answered that question and I think maybe I am ready for a change, and you're thinking about you want to write, you want to consult, you want to teach, you want to do media, you want to invest, you just want to do something different and you don't know the first step. I'm always happy to talk to people and give them humble advice of how to get started or make connections for you. I think we're all in this together. So we want to definitely help. I'm on Instagram as well. It's more personal, but Dr. Natalie Marks. And then if you have interest in angel investing, if you're listening and you're thinking like, oh, entrepreneurship, that sounds really cool. And I want to hear all the new stuff that's starting. You can visit us at Vane, VANE.vet. You can learn all about our investor group and some of the advisory work we're doing and some of the cool new startup technologies that will hopefully be in our industry in the coming years to help pets and people. So
that's outstanding. Thanks so much for being here, Natalie. Guys, thanks for tuning in, everybody. Take care of yourselves, gang.
Thanks, everybody.
And that's what I got. Guys, thanks for being here. Thanks to Dr. Natalie Marks. Guys, take care of yourselves, everybody. I'll talk to you later on.